I was back to trusting the old fly instincts again. There were plenty of more unreliable things, such as any decision by Lieutenant Weems. Hadn't thought of Weems for a while. My lip curled. Weems was probably the first zombie. Reworking him would take the least amount of effort. I felt something in my hand. I stared. The thing I'd fished out of the sludge. I held it up close, staring in confusion. Then it clicked. It was a map, a video schematic of the labs. Jesus and Mary. I guess even the greenest cloud can have a silver screen lining. I decided to follow the same roadmap I'd been on for several levels now. Down, down, down. No reason to stop. I might as well see what was at the very bottom level, which, according to the map I'd seen in the nuclear plant, was the main computer station, 2 floors down. But in the absence of Arlene marks, I'd have to plan the route myself, just as soon as I could make tops and bottoms out of my new toy. I suddenly felt a wave of weakness and fever. I hoped I hadn't already given myself a death sentence from the toxin. Phobos Lab was dark. Phobos Lab stank like an open sewer. But if there was anything left of the original installation here, then medical supplies had to be near at hand, if they hadn't been left in the typical condition of guns and radio sets. I picked that as my first priority. I needed an all-purpose antitoxin and a stimulant. Leaning against a wall for support, I found a weapons locker the hard way. I leaned against it, and the door collapsed inward. Guns. I pawed through my treasure trove, scooping up as much ammo as I could shovel into my pack. Then I stared in reverence. Beneath the shells and bullets rested a state-of-the-art AB-10 machine pistol. The question was, did it still work after scores of zombies and spinies had monkeyed with it? I checked it out, cleaned the barrel, then reloaded it. I almost pulled the trigger to do the only test that really counts, but stuck to my original policy of not making any more noise than was absolutely required. I cleaned the machine pistol as thoroughly as I could before adding it to my arsenal. There was little doubt of this lethal package receiving a test real soon, with a real target, and hopefully with a margin of error to try something else if it failed. The best choice might be to have the pistol in one hand and the shotgun in the other. Nothing wrong with insurance, even if it made me feel a bit like a Wild West gunfighter. As I stood, shifting the backpack to be more comfortable and finding a place for all the weapons, a sudden attack of dizziness hit me like a grenade. Medical attention had just become my #1 priority again. I studied my hand map, working the buttons to make the pretty picture slide up and down. First task was to find me. No helpful "you are here" on this puppy. At last I found the wall crossing a trench. No sign of toxic sludge on the map, of course. I must have been living right, because the nearest infirmary, marked with a red cross, was located just a quarter click away, spitting distance. I found it, and there wasn't a single monster doctor or devil nurse. Here I'd been expecting a typical medical establishment, and was pleasantly surprised. And there were lights, the first fully operational light I'd found in the complex. If the lights had survived, maybe the doctoring stuff was still here and intact. I resisted the impulse to cross my fingers as I unlatched and opened the first promising cabinet. Motherload. Thanks, Mom. I removed a medikit with the seal still unbroken and popped her open. Inside were bandages, antitoxin compounds, even ointment for burns. My face still felt as hot as if I had a sunburn. for which I could think of Fireball instead of a weekend at the beach. I found a clean room, a metal table next to a mirror, all kinds of light, even a shower cubicle. It was time for Dr. Taggart to make a house call. I didn't do too badly, really. First off, I locked the doors, turned out all the lights except the one in the room with the table and the shower, placed the shotgun right up against the stall where I could grab it in a second, and, facing the closed office door the entire time and leaving the shower door ajar, I took the risk of bathing. Sick as I'd been feeling since immersing myself in the ooze, the mere act of washing it all away made me feel considerably better. I turned the nozzle for hot up as high as I could stand it and felt the cuts and bruises sting, then feel better. My burned face didn't get anything out of the shower but pain, but the rest of my body was doing too well for me to care. If the shower was heaven, then the fresh towel was a piece of Eden. Here I had struck a mortal blow against the shores of hell. The rest was pretty simple. I put antibiotic and bandages on the worst of my wounds and cuts, taped my bruised ribs, didn't even remember where I got them, and took my time smearing the cold, soothing ointment on the burns. The only moment when Doc Taggart almost felled his patient was when I, noticed 30 or 40 hypodermics, all neatly labeled general stimulant. I don't like needles. Never have. But there was good reason to pick up one of these needles and give myself a shot. Just as good a reason to pack some in shock-proof carriers and take them along. I could run into Arlene, and she might need a lift. I might run into some other survivor. And if I were going to do all that, the only reasonable thing was for me to give myself an injection first. "You don't need to do that," said the little voice in my head. "Just find another blue-faced sphere." I argued with the voice. It might be a once-in-a-lifetime fluke. I can't count on that happening again. That's when I noticed that I was talking to myself. Sheesh. All this just to avoid sticking myself with a needle. No more. I bravely wielded the needle, got out the alcohol and cotton swab. This couldn't be any worse than what I'd been going through lately. Well, not by much anyway. I wolfed some food from the small refrigerator, then hunted for a flashlight. Alas, all I found was one of those pencil beam lights. If I wanted to find out if a zombie had a sore throat, or any throat at all, I was set. According to my map, I had to go north to find some sort of route down. At least my compass was still functioning. I hated to leave, but the infirmary had done its job. I was tired, not exhausted. Hungry, not starving, and not shaking like I had amoebic dysentery. The only problem, aside from demons, two-legged pigs, and murderous corpses, was that I had lost Arlene's trail. If she were hurt, laying up somewhere, I might accidentally leave her behind on an upper level. The point was that I could concentrate again. The last thing I did before stepping out again into the dark was check the boots. They'd held up better than I thought, but I stuffed some pillowcases in for added insulation. Outside, it was just as dark as before, but I wasn't as bothered this time. The human race may not have blue spheres, but we do all right. I stayed in that frame of mind as I went north. I scuttled along the corridors, letting my shotgun peek around corners first, until I reached a huge chamber. It was dark, but not the pitch black I had just come from. At least I could tell I had entered a larger area. The next moment, I was under attack. Claws raked across the shoulder plates of the battle armor I had just reinforced. When I tried to fend off the enemy, I half expected to feel the crocodile-type hide of the spiked monsters, but instead, my hands sank into a pulpy mass, and the contact made my flesh crawl even through the thick gloves. The light was on, and I should have been able to see the scum, but I was getting nothing. Then I pushed against the jelly-like stuff and took a few, faltering steps back. I saw a familiar shimmering, the same thing I had seen when I thought I was fighting a ghost. That time, the issue was resolved by a miracle fireball. This time, I was on my own. Didn't this goddamned jelly-shimmering, half-assed, invisible son of a bitch know the rules? Ghosts can't hurt people. They can only scare them to death. Then the Casper pounded me, knocking me back on my butt and kicking the wind out of me. I thanked Mary for the armor as I shoved the barrel of the shotgun right into the shimmering effect and pulled the trigger, hoping that if this thing had a mouth, that was exactly where he was going to get it. I don't know if I killed it. I don't know if it can be killed. But it didn't bother me anymore after that. Not liking the idea of being followed by more invisible spooks, I jogged for a while, hoping to be done with this part as soon as possible. I also kept both eyes open for a pair of light amp goggles, but I'd used up my good luck quotient at the infirmary. To exit the labs, I had to enter the darkest room yet, black as coal. I wasn't surprised. This was at the north end of the installation, where, after groping in the dark by touch and even daring to use my tiny pin light, I finally found a small opening. This led down a narrow corridor to a tight, metal, spiral staircase going down, way down. I started to get very dizzy spinning around so many times. Central processing had more tight, narrow corridors than anywhere else on Phobos. Good thing I'm not claustrophobic. The light was better than the labs, but that's like saying LA cab drivers are more polite than cab drivers in Mexico City. And, at long last, I found another AS. I stared at it, overwhelmed by inappropriate emotion. She was alive. She got this far. Relief was a physical thing, perched on my back. The arrow pointed to a branching corridor that seemed small enough to give a midget a backache, but crawling down it was a good move. At the other end was a completely intact map of this section. The bad guys must have been getting careless lately. If this kept up, I might find a functioning radio. Central processing was laid out in a rough triangular shape. It made me think of a robot riding a motorcycle. Maybe I was more wasted than I realized. The southeast corner was made up of 4 interconnected rooms. A warning note was attached that 3 motion detector triggers will close any door in the facility for a span of 30 seconds as a security precaution. I could just see myself getting caught in a room with wall-to-wall enemies while I counted off. 30, 29, 28, notify next of kin. Unfortunately, I couldn't take the map with me unless I ripped it out of the wall and dragged it along, and my hand map still showed the labs above. If there were a way of changing the view, I couldn't find it. It occurred to me that we humans needed to learn everything possible about these bastards. Otherwise, Earth was a sitting duck. We couldn't shoot it out with these things and expect to survive. We had to outsmart them, or die. I was surprised that I had survived this long. I was a pretty good Marine. There was no false modesty about that. But Arlene was remarkable. If I could survive, surely she could. Hoped she would keep it up. Hoped I would too. But this nonsense couldn't go on forever. As I looked at the map, I knew. I just knew that the 30-second security rule about doors meant there was a welcoming committee waiting for me. Well, you knew the job was dangerous when you took it, Fly. They'll get you in the end. But who were they? They weren't the pitiful wrecks that looked human though dead inside. They weren't the spinies or metal skulls or ghosts either. The one making snuffling pig sounds gave me the creeps, but somehow I knew the creature was mentally no more than an animal. If I hadn't encountered the one monster who enjoyed talking, I'd be tempted to conclude we were being invaded by an alien barnyard. But the intelligence was there, just well hidden. Even without the talking demon, the alien technology itself was proof of a mastermind. So why didn't the intelligence simply organize the monsters and zombies into a naval search pattern and be done with it? Why were Arlene and I being allowed to play gypsy, entering one level after another, shooting it out with pretty much the same cast of characters, encountering the same hazards, and beating them over and over and over again? Maybe it was all a pre-invasion test, or worse still, a sadistic game. But test or game, it had to be teaching the enemy mind something important. The important question for the survival of the human race was, what the hell was I learning? I hated to admit it, but so far the answer was not much.